Cycling for me has never been about the bikes. They've only ever been the prerequisite tool. I do not see just a bike race, I see riders on heroic journeys and warriors doing battle. At one point, cycling was the most popular sport in Europe because newspapers told magnificent tales about epic races and crafted the great champions into legends. But with the advent of television, cycling lost some of its mystique, and that golden age of journalism and narration has perished. So now let us try to return some romance to the beautiful sport. Let us praise and give glory to phenomenal performances to be remembered for decades to come. Let us dwell on the moments that inspire and move us. Let us chronicle the rise and fall of heroes. Let us chart these life-changing journeys, these cycling odysseys. All right, welcome back to another episode of Cycling Odysseys. I'm your host, Patrick Santino. All right, it's the big one. It's the big one. The biggest one. I do think this was my finest hour as far as reports go and everything like that. Though, actually, I like tomorrow's too. Tomorrow's actually. But anyways, this was like the biggest stunner. Anyways, I knew it was a big deal as soon as it started happening. Well, everybody kind of did. And I was so thankful. I decided to do this blog on a whim, you know, because I was highly on the fence, highly on the fence the night or about 2 days before stage one. Like, should I do blogs of this? I know it's going to be a lot of work and who knows if it'll even be good. And I don't know. It's up for you guys to decide if it's actually good, but I had a lot of fun with it. I was blessed to have such a good tour to do this, you know, to start off this with. It was a lot of fun to figure out what I was doing and everything. This one obviously comes in and is by far the longest, but can you really blame me? There's so much to cover. So historic. That saying that, one of the few things I screwed up with this one is the title sucks. You know, the greatest race of truth. I guess that's shorter, but what I really should have done, despite the length, should have been the greatest ride against the clock in the history of the bicycle. That would be more accurate and fully sum up everything that's talked about. But whatever, that's what I did. It's also funny too. I remember, man, obviously it's like now 4 months ago or something. I remember watching that, and you know, there's been a couple friends who would watch cycling or watch the tour who don't usually watch cycling, but they were watching the tour pretty regularly, and we were texting back and forth and stuff. And I just sent a text like probably after the first time check when Pogacar is starting to gain time. I'm just like, you guys watching this? Like, you guys seeing this? And then, you know, the one's like, oh yeah. And so we're texting back and forth and everything. And then it's about done. And like the other one that had been watching it, he's just like, man, I didn't even bother to watch today. Like, because he thought the time trial would be boring. I just text back. I'm just like, man, you effed up. That's it. That was all I said. And it's just like, yeah, that's the truth, you know. I mean, that was historic. That was one of the greatest sporting events or greatest sporting moments I've seen in my life. That was pretty spectacular, pretty good. With that, let's jump into it. The greatest race of truth. 2020 Tour de France, Stage 20, Loire to La Planche de Belleville, individual time trial, 36 kilometers. The greatest time trial ride in the history of the bicycle was produced today as major GC shifts take place on the La Planche de Belleville penultimate day time trial. The dramatic Race of Truth has never more so lived up to its name. Put to shame are Musor Chrono Jacques Anquetil's Grand Prix des Nations wins compared to the ride we saw today. The cannibal Eddie Merckx's hour record set in Mexico City in 1972 cannot hold a candle to the ride I shall soon describe. For all his dominance, even Big Mig Miguel Indurain did not have a signature ride of such weight like this one had today. The hour record performances of Musor Prologue, Chris Boardman, and the Flying Scotsman Graham O'Brien, which were akin to the space race, have now been blown out of the water. And even Even the most legendary time trial performance of them all by Greg LeMond in 1989 has finally been bested. It is for such Herculean performances that shake the foundation of the world like the one we saw today that we watch this sport day in and day out. Because we simply never know when we shall be dazzled and stunned by a performance we shall remember for literally the entire next century. In the future cycling history books that shall cover this new generation, all shall give this day's performance the place of honor. Here, in the 2020th year of our Lord, in the midst of the restoration of the world after the coronavirus pandemic, the greatest time trial, chrono pursuit, effort against the clock in the history of the bicycle has taken place. Richie Porte. The Tasmanian Richie Porte of Trek Segafredo has ridden himself onto the podium of the Tour de France for the first time in his career at the ripe old age of 35. It was probably the crowning achievement of his career. It was the time trial of his life, and his ride was an afterthought, completely eclipsed by this greatest time trial, not only of the century, but of all time. Oh, La Planche de Belleville, how I love thee. Yes, dear readers, the climb where this individual time trial finished has a special place in my heart. In 2012, still during the years when the only bike race I knew was the Tour, I saw Chris Froome of Ineos Grenadiers for the first time pacing Bradley Wiggins for the entire climb. It seemed his domestique duties were done for the day. He then still outsprinted Cadel Evans up the final 20% ramp. He was the first to come over the horizon as the insane gradients flattened out in the final meters to take his first Tour stage victory. In that moment, I pointed to the TV and said that man would win the 2013 Tour de France, and he did. Stage 10 of the 2014 Tour de France finished at the top of La Planche de Belleville, and it was a day I shall never forget, for it was the day I officially fell in love with cycling. There is not room to tell that romantic love story here, because today's events are so much more historic and thrilling. And yet, if not for that stage in 2014, perhaps today I would have skipped out on watching what everyone thought would be a business end time trial. More of a formality checkup test rather than the ultimate race of truth. Yes, La Planche de Belleville was the scene of another legendary performance today, by far its greatest yet. As in the past, though, it was the riders themselves who created the drama today. How does one go about producing the greatest individual effort of all time against the clock? What was he thinking when he woke up this morning? What was his warm-up procedures? Was there an early morning effort to warm up the legs for the whole day? Was there a course recon? What was the feeding schedule for the day? Surely he nailed the final hour or so preparation routine before he descended the time trial starting ramp. And none of those questions matter compared to psyching oneself up for the biggest performance in their career. Quite frankly, I highly doubt he even knew he had such a performance in him. He did not know what he was about to do, and that made it all the better. The day got off to a slow start, actually. It really was the business end of the Tour for so many of the early riders. The most notable early ride was not due to his performance, but to the ovations he received. Why, it woke up the stage. Thibaut Pinot of Groupama FDJ came down the start ramp to the wildest applauses on the day. These roads are where Thibaut grew up. 9 kilometers into the TT, he rode through his home village of Mélisy, where his father Regis is mayor. His friends and family were on the roadside. I do not say probably, dear readers, because I am convinced the whole town was out in force. Pinot's former school teachers were there, with the local baker who would give him free croissants as a child. The barber who would give him the same haircut as all the other boys in his youth was cheering for him. There was the now retired priest who baptized him 30 years ago. There is his childhood crush. There was the boy who milks the goats on his farm while Thibaut is away at his races. Yes, Thibaut Pinot owns a goat farm. And yes, every villager was there to see the darling of their village ride through in the biggest bike race in the world. Ah, how beautiful it would have been if Pinot were in yellow as he rode up that last 20% ramp of La Planche de Belleville, where his fans had painted Pinot, Pinot, Pinot for literally 200 meters of the road. But ultimately, it was good Pinot was not in contention today, because it would have been a shame to see the unstoppable one break his heart on his home roads. Pinot rode well, but he did not trouble the top time already set, nor the top men still to come. In his Belgian time trial champion skin suit, Wout van Aert of Jumbo-Visma was the first mighty one to threaten the best time already set. He was down 38 seconds at the first time split, 14.5 kilometers into the course. But by the bottom of La Planche de Belfi, he had drawn even. Wout opted to switch to his road bike at the bottom of the climb in order to eat up the meters of steep gradients, as he has all tour, in the service of his yellow jersey wearing team leader Primož Roglič of Jumbo-Visma. He crossed the finish line with a bike throw 38 seconds quicker than the best time thus far. It was a strong performance, but behind the final contenders were already on the road, and something major was brewing. Richard Carapaz of Ineos Grenadiers rolled down the ramp in the polka dot jersey, knowing the plan to sandbag the flat and steamroll up the finishing climb in order to set the best time uphill and retain his King of the Mountains lead. Soon after, Tom Dumoulin of Jumbo-Visma, former time trial world champion, was off down the ramp, ready to stretch his legs and put in a stage-winning performance. Rigoberto Urán of EF went off with Adam Yates of Mitchelton Scott a minute after him. Surely it would be a race of truth between these two, because Rigo began the day only 10 seconds behind Yates on GC. The same would be true for Enric Mas of Movistar and Mikel Landa of Bahrain McLaren, who were the next two to start. Only 50 seconds separated them on GC. After Landa was fourth place Richie Porte, who was only 22 seconds ahead of Landa on GC, and 1 minute and 39 seconds behind Superman Lopez of Astana. It would surely be a race of truth for Superman Lopez to keep his GC podium position. Oh, too often the time trial is the Achilles heel for so many Colombians, and it was only the Slovenians left to start after that. Would it be a Slovenian Bowl? A rematch of the Slovenian Time Trial Nationals that took place in June, while the world was just in the beginnings of releasing from lockdowns. It was surprising to see the headlines that Tadej Pogačar of UAE had beaten Primož Roglič by 8 seconds in that time trial, because in 2019, Roglič had beaten him handedly in the two time trials they both competed in. We all remember Roglič burst onto the scene at the 2016 Giro as a time trialist. He's been world-class in the discipline ever since, while also orchestrating a perfect 5-year trajectory to win the Tour de France. Only this race of truth, this final time trial test, was left for him to pass. After this test, he would be the champion of the Tour de France off the back of the tremendous teamwork his Jumbo-Visma team had put together over the past years, but specifically 19 days, to finally slay the Sky/Ineos giant. As he warmed up on his time trial bike connected to the turbo trainer, a staff member and teammate Tony Martin of Jumbo-Visma helped pin his bib number on his back in the most aero position possible. Tony Martin, the Panzerwagen, 4 times champion of the world in the time trial discipline. What an ally for Primož Roglič to have in his team. Martin's world champion days are long beyond the veteran now, but after already completing the course and showering, he was still helping prepare his team leader for the discipline he's been so successful at in the past. And meanwhile, the other Slovenian, alone, on the trainer with headphones on and cotton balls up his nose containing some sort of oil to better open up his air passageways. How would young Pogačar in his white jersey fare against the clock in this race of truth? Surely he would retain his white jersey, but would he take back the polka dots also? That could prove to be a tall order. And how would he fare on GC? Superman was not far behind, but his time trialing record is poor. It was more of a question if he could give his older brother a race today, who started 57 seconds ahead of him on GC. Well, a minute after Superman began, down the starting ramp went little brother Pog, and a minute after him, big brother Rog. All had begun the race of truth. By the time Roglič had started, the time checks for the top 10 on GC at the first intermediate split were starting to come through. Dumoulin was only 12 seconds behind the leading time. He was on a good day. Urán was 1:08 behind the lead time, and Yates was 1:10 behind. So those two competitors were running even with each other. Mas was 1:10 down, average. Landa was 1:30 down, bad. And Porte was only 47 seconds down. He was on a good day. Porte's day got better when he heard Superman must have gotten his cape caught in the phone booth because he was already 41 seconds behind Richie Porte himself. Oh, that was big news. Superman was wilting, and Richie Port was throwing down a ride worthy of the podium. And then, less than a minute later, we saw that Tadej Pogačar was flying like a peregrine falcon today. At this first time check, only 14.5 kilometers into the 36-kilometer route, Primož Roglič, originally of time trial fame, had already ceded 13 seconds to his little brother, Tadej Pogačar. With still 17.5 kilometers to go to the finish, Tadej Pogačar in the white jersey had passed Superman Lopez, who had started 1 full minute ahead of him, but it was of little interest. Yes, all the other storylines fell away after the first time check, because little brother Pog was challenging big brother Rog for the inheritance now. After his Grand Columbia stage win before the second rest day, an interviewer asked Pogačar if he would try to win the Tour de France, and Pogačar's response was simply, "That's the plan." He probably answered that with genuine confidence and intent, but did he actually think he could contend with big brother Rog this tour? What about after his time losses to Superman and Rog on the Col de Loze? Or on the last mountain stage where Roglič seemed to have him on the ropes on the gravel roads after the summit of the Beyond category climb? But this was 21-year-old Tadej Pogačar, who found himself only 57 seconds down on the yellow jersey going into this final test of his first Tour de France. It was a no-brainer he would go for it, yet it was still a surprise to see how much ground he was already making up. Yes, the little brother was all in to win. How would the elder respond? What information do directors sportifs provide to the rider's radio from the car behind? Some riders hate to hear the time checks of their competitors and only want to ride their own race. But today it seemed like Big Brother Rog wanted to hear how he was doing over Little Brother Pog. After the first time check, Roglič, who was by no means having a bad day, did not look nearly as smooth or comfortable on his bike. Yes, surely he was being updated on the young one's progress, but he had a 57-second buffer on his little brother to begin the day. He would just need to raise his pace higher and maintain his gap. But that is easier said than done. By the time Roglič hit 16 kilometers to go, Pogačar had already taken 20 seconds out of him. Roglic's buffer on yellow was now down to 39 seconds. By the time Roglič hit 13 kilometers to go, his buffer on holding yellow was down to just 31 seconds. Could Roglič recover the time with a great climb, or were we reliving 1989? Since 1975, the Tour de France has finished on the Champs-Élysées in the shadow of the Arc de Triomphe in Paris. All of those years since, the last stage has been a flat road stage with the gentleman's agreement to not even race until they started laps of the finishing circuit where the race would heat up one last time so the sprinters and the Tour could have one final massive curtain call. In all of those years except one. In 1989, the organizers decided to forget the coronation ceremony and ultimate sprint, and instead run a final individual time trial from Versailles to the Champs-Élysées. American Greg LeMond, who had surprisingly resurrected his career after being shot while hunting, had battled Frenchman Laurent Fignon for yellow all tour. They had passed the maillot jaune off to each other multiple times over the course of the race, but finally everyone thought LeMond's 50-second deficit to Fignon going into the final 24-kilometer time trial would be a bridge too far for LeMond, and the tour was done and dusted. Everyone except LeMond and maybe his inner circle. Too many books, documentaries, and interviews have been made to cover how LeMond rode the greatest time trial in history until today to beat Fignon by 58 seconds and win the 1989 Tour de France by just 8 seconds. With all the lead changes throughout and the surprise twist in the finale, according to many, it is the greatest tour of all time. I do not think many will say the 2020 Tour de France shall top the 1989 Tour, but only halfway through the Slovenians' rides today, I thought this 2020 Race of Truth was already in contention with that final Champs-Élysées Race of Truth in 1989, no matter which Slovenian would come out on top. Up the road, Roglic's Jumbo teammate Tom Dumoulin came across the line 10 seconds ahead of the other Jumbo teammate Wout van Aert with a time of 57 minutes and 16 seconds to set the new best time of the day. Down the road, the young Pogačar was sailing and taking risks on every corner, while older brother Roglic fought to staunch the bleeding. But with 7 kilometers still to ride, Pogačar's grasp on yellow was only 24 seconds. Both must have been getting time checks because the richer got richer and the poorer got poorer. At the bottom of the climb, they both opted to swap onto road bikes. And oh, it was no surprise when Pogs was better. But this was it. Roglic's last hope that he could keep pace with his little brother on the climb and maintain his now only 20-second grip on the yellow jersey. Never have I said with a heavier heart, alas, he could not. With over 4 kilometers still to climb, Pog had already put 57 seconds into his older brother, Rog, this time trial. And they were at that point virtually tied for the yellow jersey. With 3 kilometers to go, the little brother, Pog, was up 22 seconds on his big brother. Roglic was spitting a high cadence and clearly not putting out the power that Pogačar was laying down. With 2 kilometers to go, you could see it in Roglic's body language that he understood he had lost. But oh, dear readers, Pogačar was not just beating Roglic, he was barnstorming to the win. Some in the press said Julian Alaphilippe of Deceuninck Quickstep rode with diamonds in his legs in last year's Tour as he bravely rode out of his depth to defend yellow until he blew up on the penultimate mountain stage. To what shall the press compare Pogačar's legs this year? Yes, the rich get richer. Pogačar would not relent. He rode all the way to the line. Tom Dumoulin and Richie Porte, who about tied him, bested Wout van Aert's time by 10 seconds. Pogačar beat their times by a minute 20 with a time of 55 minutes and 55 seconds. It was so stunning, no one could even cheer. It was too much to process. Not a soul woke up this morning expecting to see such a stunning performance. As I said before, we can only say it was the greatest individual effort against the clock in the history of the bicycle. No one expected Pogačar to take yellow today, or even to take time out of Roglic. If you read and listen to Le Monde in the interviews about 1989, that Champs-Élysées time trial was his 3rd or 4th time trial against Fignon in the past couple of months alone. Based on those performances, Le Monde not only knew there was a real chance he could beat Fignon, Le Monde really did think he would before rolling down the start ramp. Today, at best, everyone left the door open to the possibility that Pogačar could win because they know of the famous story of 1989. But no one actually thought he would do it. In days and months and years and decades to come, Pogačar will be asked if he thought on the morning of this most famous day he would win. And my guess is that this morning he would have said no. For 19 stages, Roglic had appeared to be bulletproof to all, and surely everyone thought he would finish off the job in his ace discipline. This is what impresses me most, more than Le Mans' victory. Pogačar himself was probably almost as surprised as the rest of us by how well he did today. But the deficit itself is not the only reason this was the greatest effort against the clock. This victory was more stunning than 1989 because not only it was more unexpected, it was more intimate. 5 years ago, Primož Roglic was a nobody cyclist from Slovenia, but at the time, Tadej Pogačar was a nobody teenager, probably just learning how to drive. In that 5 years, Primož Roglic has done the most remarkable systematic build-up to the Tour de France victory anyone has ever seen. Surely already 3 years ago, young Tadej must have been looking at the elder Primož as a hero and trailblazer. But by last year at the latest, all were aware of Pogačar's meteoric rise, Roglic most of all. Oh, we've seen it this tour, dear readers. They have a relationship, and it does have a brotherly dynamic. Remember stage 9 where Pogačar almost collided and crashed them both, but Roglic immediately said sorry and checked how he was? And we've seen them chatting before and after the races like buddies. They both have the utmost respect for each other. Neither really even underestimate the other. Seeing them, surely I have gotten a sense of an older brother, little brother relationship. Pog surely saw Rog as a trailblazer. If not for Rog, the scouts and agents may not have heard of Pog for years more, if ever. And everything Pog has experienced, Rog has already been through, and he could offer advice like a mentor to the young Pog until today. The older brother was one final test away from completing his ascendance to the pinnacle of the sport. But all of a sudden, his mentee, his younger brother, has beat him to the top. But it does not just feel like the little brother has beaten the older brother to something that both would eventually accomplish. Not many people win the Tour de France, and every tour Roglic shall try to win after this, his now superior, now more accomplished little brother will be standing in his way. And though he loves his older brother, he will not gift him such a win. For me, this vanquishing of the elder does not feel like a Slovenian version of the Coppi Bartoli 1949 Giro d'Italia, where Fausto Coppi definitively eclipsed the aging Gino Bartoli, because, alas, Roglic had not finished establishing himself as Bartoli clearly had. It feels much more like an ancient and murkier myth where brother slayed brother. It feels like a reversal of the Romulus and Remus story, when a dispute broke out between the two brothers about where to found the city. It was the older Romulus who slew the younger Remus despite all their adventures together. Romulus is immortalized in the name of their city. If Remus had vanquished him, the city would have been known as Rheims and not Rome. Yes, though he surely had no malicious intent, it felt like today the little brother Pogačar committed fratricide today, which is what made this performance all the more stunning. Even a Frenchman can recognize the perfect happy fairy tale the 1989 Tour was for Greg LeMond, who came back to win from within an inch of death. But here, the talented younger brother with his meteoric rise has savagely denied his trailblazing older brother to complete the final step in his steady progression from zero to hero. It is another story that you cannot make up. It is another script Hollywood would reject. Not just one, but two nobodies of a tiny country with barely any results to speak of rise to the top of a sport so quickly. And then, in an edgy turn at the end, the elder who did everything right and even befriended this junior is unexpectedly slayed by him when the junior produces the greatest performance in the history of the sport. Yes, dear readers, it is too hard to believe how tough it must be to be Primož Roglic, because tomorrow he has to wake up and realize it was not all just a nightmare. Roglic had stripped the visor off his helmet at some point on the stage. As he was coming up the steep gradients in the final kilometers, it was haunting to see him. His helmet was tilted. Somehow his hair seemed unkempt. His face was completely pale, but his eyes showed the most emotion. He was a deer in the headlights. They were oh so big. He was wide-eyed with shock. He looked as if he had just survived an enemy bombing in World War II. He was shell-shocked. He was in disbelief. He was broken. As the two Slovenians were still approaching the line, a finish line camera captured Wout van Aert and Tom Dumoulin standing at the finish line, waiting to congratulate their team leader on winning the Tour de France. But soon, they also knew the writing was on the wall in the very final kilometers. Their faces seemed to be made of stone, watching the same images on the big screen that we were seeing too at home. They were crestfallen. How were they going to console their leader and even themselves? Had they worked day in and day out for 90 days for Roglic's little brother to beat them all at the very last possible moment? The race is over. They do not even get an opportunity as a team to crack him. How could this be real? Oh, has the ecstasy of victory and the agony of defeat ever been on more display than today? Day after day, race after race, year after year, Jumbo-Visma has been assembling and grooming the talent to compete with the greatest cycling teams in the world. They did that. They made the mighty Ineos Grenadiers go out with a whimper before the second rest day of this tour. How many times have we praised Tom Dumoulin, Sepp Kuss of Jumbo-Visma, and the Swiss Army knife Wout van Aert as they destroyed almost all of Primož Roglic's enemies. And then today, Roglic did not even do anything wrong. He finished 1 minute and 56 seconds down. On his best day, which potentially he could have had if he had not been getting the morale-killing time checks that Pogačar was stealing the race from him, he would have finished around Dumoulin, 1 minute and 20 seconds back, potentially a dozen or so seconds ahead at most. If Roglic had done that, he still would have lost the Tour to Pogačar. Roglic crossed the line and just sat down on the ground in disbelief for a long time. Wout tried to say something to him, but Roglic couldn't even acknowledge him. This is an agony that has not even sunk in yet. This was the last strange thing of the day, and then I wrap up, dear readers. It is heartbreaking for Roglic and the whole Jumbo-Visma team, but without question, they should be proud of their efforts. They did all they could, but the better man won, and it took one of the greatest performances in the history of all sport to unseat their team leader off the back of a total team effort. If Roglic had to let victory slip through his fingers, which seems he was fated to do, could he have asked for a better group of guys to do it with? I know that seems extremely corny and cliche, but truly for these past 19 days, this Jumbo-Visma team has been on an epic journey, an odyssey that would impress Odysseus. Surely a more special bond is forming between them, in a sport chock full of team camaraderie. But more importantly, look at Jumbo-Visma in comparison to UAE Team Emirates. Who is Tadej Pogačar going to celebrate with? Can you name any of his teammates? I look out for that stuff. Watching the efforts of selfless teammates is what moves me and gives me the most pleasure watching the sport. I saw David Dela Cruz of UAE stick with Pogačar and do one big turn for him one time on the Col de Loz stage. Other than that, I saw Fabio Aru abandon with some sort of medical issue on stage 11 or 12. And I saw Alexander Kristoff of UAE win stage 1 in the wet in Nice. But that was a lifetime ago. Are we about to meet 4 or 5 random dudes drinking champagne on the way to the Champs-Elysees who supposedly helped Pogačar win the Tour de France? Seriously, I figured when Pogačar would finally win the Tour in a year or two, one of the main people that would celebrate with him would be his big brother and mentor, Primož Roglic. Even in a year or two, if it was Roglic he'd have to beat, Roglic could better accept the defeat as a former Tour winner himself. When Roglic finally stood up, he made a point to quickly congratulate Pogačar before he started a ton of winners' interviews. In Roglic's own interview, he said he did all he could today, but the result is what it is. He said, "I am disappointed, I will cry. I already did, but that's how it was. I want it to be a little different, but I cannot change it. It's true I did not have the best day. Tadej was in a different world for me, and he definitely deserves his win, so really, congrats to him." Surely Roglic is not mad at his little brother Pogačar for beating him. He is disappointed the Tour slipped through his fingers. I don't know where the older brother goes from here, besides come back next year and try again. The competition will be fiercer, he will be another year older, and he will have to rebound from a devastating defeat. At the moment, the only consolations I see for Roglic are that it will be the shortest gap between tours in the history of the event. He should have the support of a strong team even in defeat, and it took the greatest time trial in history to defeat him. Tadej Pogačar can retire tomorrow evening, and we shall still speak of his ride with hallowed words. As we grow old and tell younger generations about the performances that have deeply moved us, this one will be high on the list. With the perfect kinslaying element mixed with the stunning unexpectedness, it may even make us shiver or give us creeps or goosebumps decades later. It is only an afterthought to confirm that Pogačar handedly took back the polka dot jersey as well. Carapaz was nowhere to be seen on the results. Truly, I have not seen his split for the climb. More news and inside stories will come out about this day. Books and documentaries shall be produced about it, but all of us shall be slow to forget the stunned emotions we felt when we saw Tadej Pogačar, the little brother, heartbreakingly slay his big brother and mentor Primož Roglic in the greatest time-trialing performance of all time to win the Tour de France. There are not enough superlatives in the language to describe Pogačar, and it is still too hard to believe what happened. And at the same time, the performance broke our hearts as we saw the agony of defeat on the faces of Primož Roglic and his Jumbo-Visma team. All right, so I was re-listening to it so I could take some notes that I would, if there's anything I need to follow up with or talk about. I have to note, I love La Planche de Belfi. I gave Christian Prudhomme some, what's the word? Crap, I guess. I can't say the S word. I gave Christian Prudhomme some crap, yesterday, kind of throughout this. They has unorthodox tours, but La Planche de Belfi was his find. I love that climb. special place in my heart. As I said, it was finishing up there was the day I fell in love with cycling. That'll have to be its own story eventually. But, just keep hints and teasers. You can go back and watch, like, the 4. Maybe now they've gone up 5 times. 5 times that they've gone up it, and you can figure out which one it was. Multiple have great meaning to me. But the Pinot part at the beginning, totally unnecessary, but I thought it was fun. And this is totally cribbed from a pretty historic cycling literature source. You can find out what it is. I mean, I put my own spin on it. I didn't use exactly what that guy said, but the villagers and stuff, like, okay, go. You can find it. Find it. Let me know if you find it. I was questioning, how did Pogačar wake up and just think like, man, this is what he's gonna do? And I really don't think he did. But it's like, how do you even prepare for that and everything? Sounds like you sleep in. He had already recon that climb twice and done at least like 4 all out, maybe it was like 6 all out assaults on it, just to prep. And he knew the rest of the time trial as well, because he did 2 recons of it in the months leading up. Like he did something in the spring and then probably something right around before the tour. So by the time they got there, I think he had a late night because of transfers and everything the day before. So he just slept in, is what it sounds like, until almost like noon. Maybe that's a little ridiculous, but it was probably like 10 o'clock or something is what I was hearing, if I remember rightly. So yeah, that was that's how versus Roglic. Roglic was out there really dialing in, preparing. I don't know. Some people say he went too hard in the warm up. I mean, who knows? Of course, I didn't see him warm up, so who knows? The other people might have. So yeah, let's see. Based on the first time check, I think Port was down 30 seconds on Dumoulin, which means he had like the climb of his life up La Planche de Belfi. Besides that, Pogačar, just blew them all out of the water. And sorry, Port, it doesn't matter as much, even though I like you a lot, dude. But you got your 3rd place. You're super happy about it. And it's special to you, as it should be. I'm really happy for you too. Pretty unforgettable to see Roglic finish. That was a sorry sight. Oh my gosh, that's what sports are all about. Man, I felt bad for him. I felt so bad for him. And same with that, that's the iconic image now too of Dumoulin and Wout van Aert. Wout had the mask on already, but you could still see in his eyes they were crestfallen, totally. Could barely, not really understand it. I mean, they clearly understood it, but it's just so unexpected, unbelievable. And then, yeah, that's the other. I highlighted this in there. I don't know if this is clear, but if Roglic on his best day, is he really beating Tom Dumoulin, who had a good day, by more than 20 seconds? Because if he beat Dumoulin by 20 seconds, he still loses the Tour to Pogačar. It's unbelievable how good a time trial Pogačar did. I mean, that was crazy. And I really think Roglic could have been with Dumoulin had he not been getting the time checks that, yeah, Pogačar is just stealing this right out from under you, I mean, like, he would have just rode a more calm race and just done his thing, but, the pressure got to him, and even if it didn't, that was that. He was losing it. I was too tough on the UAE team. I mean, I can't just say like they haven't done anything for him. There's all the flat days where they're probably working for him. The guys in the team car definitely were, encouraging him and telling him how to handle the situation and everything. And yeah, but at the same time though, it's like, all right, they weren't the team of the Tour, which is kind of cool that the team of the Tour didn't win the Tour, but it's the first time in a while that we've seen it. But still, I'll get into it tomorrow on the next stage. And, of course, Roglic congratulating Pogačar so quickly. Such a special moment. Roglic, top-class dude. Oh, my gosh. He's awesome. He's super awesome. He's about in the club, I'd have to say. I think if he just wins, even if he just wins a stage of his first minor race back here, I think that'll just do it. I'll just declare it then. He's got to actually win before I declare it, you know what I mean? But yeah, so with that, follow me on Twitter, Cycling Odysseys on Twitter. Follow the blog, cyclingodysseys.com. Send me emails at cyclingodysseys@gmail.com. Subscribe to the show because these episodes obviously come out at random. And leave a 5-star review and I'll read it out on the show. Thanks for listening, everybody. Vive le cyclisme.